So, Pro, why don't you talk a little bit about? I'll scroll through here. Let's talk about the parks a little bit as we wrap it up, because I think this was another area that I don't think we've seen with this kind of level of clarity. And again, the
No,
only thing that I think got more confusing was how Disney has now split merchandise licensing up between all three of these divisions now, basically attributing licensing fees and revenues for merchandising and product sales to whatever division that they're tied to. And it's on one hand, it seems like it's a little bit cooler, but on the other hand, it's like, whoa, it kind of makes you go cross-eyed when you really start digging in. But the parks themselves, go ahead.
well, it confirms what we've reported for so long, which is that the Walt Disney World Resort is by far the cash cow of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing compares. It is the crown jewel. They should do everything they can to protect it.
Yep.
And yet they don't. In fact, they take it for granted at the maximal amount, I suppose, that they could. And what this shows, folks, just to be
and these are the recast numbers, everybody.
Yep, just to honor brevity here. I know it's been a long show, so I'll keep it really short. What we're seeing is that the vast amount of money that flows into Disney parks and experiences comes through either the Walt Disney World Resort or Disneyland. Now, we know from past numbers and things that we've seen that Disney World is orders of magnitude greater than Disneyland. So this is essentially Disney World is generating tons of income for the company. But the investment that we see going into the parks is everywhere but. So they are flowing cash into China. Vast amounts of money going into China. Lesser degree, but still significant, going into Disneyland Paris, and way down the list, Walt Disney World and Disneyland. So what that means is that if we were to just look at this division and isolate it economically, okay, so let's pretend that the other divisions don't exist for a moment. What we would find is that there's a giant sucking sound the moment you turn through those turnstiles at Disney World. Essentially, we'll leave Disneyland out because, again, it's a much smaller player. When you walk through Disney World turnstiles, there's a giant sucking sound. And that sucking sound is the mouse eradicating the dollar bills from your wallet and sending them to China, where, by the way, they receive so little, and Valiant, you can read off the comparison, but they receive so little because, essentially, the international parks are either Disney receiving simply licensing, or, in the case of China, the taxations are so high that what Disney gets back is dramatically less than what they see out of Florida. And yet Disney has mistreated, and by the way, with this Reedy Creek Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, this is yet another example of this is the biggest thing that Disney had going for them. They've had it going for them for decades, and they threw it all away so that Iger could get back into the CEO position, and so that they could make a social statement about when schools should teach bedroom issues officially as part of their curriculum to preschoolers. So to 4-year-olds. That was worth killing this giant cash cow. And now the giant cash cow that they killed, they're sending all the money from it to other places that give back so little. That's the analysis I have for it.
And I think it's a fine one. I mean, if you look at the variance here, 9 months ended $17 billion domestically. And I'd say at least 2/3 of that is from Orlando as opposed to Disneyland. And it's just,
I mean, if you just
and it may be higher. It may be 75% coming from Orlando.
Consider for a moment. Disneyland, you've got 2 parks, and it's largely, there's a lot of annual pass there, okay? 2 parks. Walt Disney World has 4 theme parks, plus water parks, plus all the hotels. I mean, it's really big.
Oh, yeah. But if you look internationally, you're talking about Disneyland Paris, or what we used to call Euro Disney. You've got Hong Kong, Shanghai, and the Oriental Land Company in Tokyo.
And let it be said, too, that the Hong Kong Disney Park, it shares its parking lot with a forced medical camp that the Chinese put up, where the future expansion park was potentially going to go. So that shows you how much China loves Disney.
Yeah. So, but my point is that if you combine all the international parks together, the revenue is probably not even that of what Disneyland itself brings in California, the much smaller of the 2 parks. Where
should that money be invested then? So if all of your parks internationally are making what is it, about 1/5, 1/4 of the domestic combined?
Yeah, roughly a little less than a fourth.
Okay. So where should Disney then invest its money, do you think? See, I would say,
Uh,
yeah, this is not hard because
Especially when you have little control over many of these foreign parks.
and they can be taken from you if at any point we go into a place, a world that we don't want to be in, right? We're
Yep.
at the precipice. We don't want to go. We don't want to cross that threshold. But if China messes with a certain island, who knows what happens? But I wouldn't want to be Disney at that point, holding on to this physical property in China that's worth so much money.
And since you're asking
Might be
about,
a tug of war.
yeah, and with ticket prices, let's look at this real quick. Is kind of the last thing here. This is the actual breakdown. Now, unfortunately, what we saw before was a breakdown domestic versus international. We don't get domestic versus breakdown or domestic versus international breakdown on each individual line item, but we do get the line items here, okay? And I want you to look at this. And while I have this up, I meant to bring this up real quick. By the way, supplemental, see ESPN, Star India. Ooh, they lost $440 million on Hotstar in the last 9 months of the fiscal year. Oh, but we'll talk about that later. You wonder why they're trying to sell it? That's
Dump
why. So in any case, let's look at this. Theme park admissions, $7.8 billion. That is, we sold you a ticket to get in. Okay. Now, I don't know if that includes things like Genie Plus or Fast Pass. I'm imagining it's probably baked into that because I don't know where else you'd put it. But then you got parks, experiences, merchandise, food and beverage as one, resorts and vacations. So look here, you've got, when they sell you a product in the park, you buy that little Mickey Mouse toy, okay? Or you go eat at, what is it there in Tomorrowland, the Starport Cafe or whatever. I can't remember this, Starlight Cafe or something like that.
How about Cosmic Rays?
Whatever the name of that little diner is in Tomorrowland next to the racetrack.
Yep, Cosmic Rays.
Cosmic Ray. Okay, is that what it is? Okay.
Yep.
Parks, experiences, and merchandise. So you buy food, you buy a meal plan when you go, you buy the Mickey doll, $5.8 billion. Look at resorts and vacations. Now, this is where they're talking about spending the $60 billion of CapEx in the next 10 years, but apparently not much of it in the U.S. They're talking about all these international sites for the other parks. $5.9 billion. That's the second biggest part. And food and beverage is right behind it. And now, what do you think they make more money on in terms of a profit margin? Food and beverage or the hotels? Think about it.
Hotels.
That's food and beverage, I'm sure, because the markups on those are crazy.
I see what you're saying because of the sodas and all that.
Yeah. $10 for a Coke and all that kind of stuff. But the point is that the revenues are still there. Merchandise, licensing,
I'm thinking about the cost of Grand Floridian and going, oh, wait a minute, $1,000
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, but I mean, over the whole scope of everything, yeah. But I mean, that's where this $24.3 billion comes from that we had on the other page.
But look at that, but look at the parks licensing and other. Because here's what I think that is, and you tell me if it's wrong.
Go ahead.
Is that OLC?
Yes.
That's what I thought. So what that means then is that the theme park admissions is actually far more impressive than what it should, otherwise would be, because they're not making any money off admissions because all those admissions in Japan go to a different company.
Yeah. They're reporting that, and then OLC is paying the licensing fee back to Disney.
Which is then to say that because we know
possibly with China too.
We know the capacity levels of all these parks. We know what, we have a general idea of what the attendance has been. By the way, it's terrible in China. We know that Disney World is pulling the vast majority of that, well, not the vast majority, but the majority of that $7 billion in admissions. So why in the world would you not be investing like crazy into that park? And they are not. They're investing in China.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.